All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back. It's me, Addy, again, and I hope you guys are doing amazing as always. So as usual, I finished yet another amazing video game over on my Twitch channel recently, so I'm here to bring you guys my quick review of that experience. And what we played most recently was a game called Dispatch. You may have heard of it. It's quite popular right now. It basically harkens back to those old school games by Telltale Games, if you were familiar with them back in the day, especially pre-2018. They used to make those really fun, narrative-heavy point-and-click adventure games like The Walking Dead, Wolf Among Us, the latter of which is my favorite game by the company. And man, even The Walking Dead itself, I would straight up consider that to be within my top 20 games of all time. It was truly an unforgettable experience, and as a lot of you may know, there were 3 or 4 seasons in total of that game. Some of the stuff in the middle wasn't great. Telltale Games did go through a bit of a lull era, especially towards the mid 2010s to late 2010s. And they started putting out way too many games way too fast, and the writing kind of took a hit as a result of that. But the early Telltale games were wonderful, and unfortunately the studio shut down in 2018, but they were revived, and they managed to come back and finish the final season of The Walking Dead with the help of Skybound, the creator of the Walking Dead series, and I really enjoyed it. That's the last game I ever played by Telltale back in 2019? Yeah, I think it was around January of 2019, I want to say. This was half a year before I even began streaming. Some of their other titles included stuff like Tales from the Borderlands, which I actually quite enjoyed a lot. A Batman game, which I never played. Game of Thrones, also never played that one. And a couple other things here and there, I believe. But the main heavy hitters, I think a lot of people would agree, were The Walking Dead and Wolf Among Us. The latter of which I'm really excited about when it comes to its announced sequel, which the studio I'm going to be talking about today is helping the new and revived Telltale work on. The studio in question is Ad Hoc. They were formed by industry veterans who worked at Telltale, and fast forward 7 years later to now, 2025, they have released Dispatch, which is basically an old school Telltale game through and through with all the modern bells and whistles. And I'm really happy to say that it's a great game. I actually had a really good time playing it. And you'll hear that sentiment echoed by a whole lot of other folks. And a lot of you might already know the rough and dirty premise of the game. It is a superhero game, but with a really fun, unique twist on the genre. It's a superhero workplace comedy, essentially, where you have to work as a dispatcher who dispatches superheroes to take care of fires around the city. And the way the game communicates that via the narrative itself, but also, more importantly, the gameplay, which involves a really fun loop of having to do exactly that, dispatch all these different superheroes, or villains rather, which we'll get into in a second, is very neat and basically reminds me a lot of Overcooked in a weird way. It's got this multitasking energy to it where you as the player have a bunch of different emergencies popping up throughout the city, and you have to send out superheroes at your disposal to take care of those situations. And which ones you send out will influence your odds of successfully completing that operation. So you have to kind of pick carefully between your heroes depending on their stats, which you can also influence as you go through, which is kind of neat. There's this RPG system as you play where you can allocate skill points into different stats like intellect, speed, strength, vigor, which you can use to modify the pre-existing heroes and amplify, their pre-existing power sets, which will then allow you to choose which hero is right for the job at hand. I really liked it, and the aesthetic was wonderful too. There were a lot of really fun little moments of banter between the characters as you would send them out on these operations with the dispatcher himself. His name's Robert Robertson. And speaking of all this, let's get into the story, right? This is an episodic, story-driven game, so that's what we should really be focusing on talking about here. So like I said, it's a workplace comedy, but the best way I can describe it is it's kind of a cross between The Boys and Invincible. It's definitely an adult-coded game. It's got a lot of adult humor, quite a few raunchy moments here and there, some nudity here and there, but it's nowhere near as irreverent or raunchy as The Boys. But at the same time, I would put it a little bit above Invincible in terms of that facet of it. It's kind of like the best of both worlds in the tone that it's going for and the story that it's trying to tell. It's ultimately got a lot of adult energy to it, but at the end of it all, without going into spoilers, obviously, it does tell a really nice, wholesome superhero story while tying up everything very nicely. I personally, and I think a lot of people are coming from the same place, was pulled in, I'm not gonna lie, due to the voice cast. The main character, again, Robert Robertson, you know, classic superhero alliteration name, is played by Aaron Paul, aka Jesse Pinkman from Breaking Bad, my favorite show of all time, up there with Better Call Saul. And what's also really cool is that a significant portion of the cast of characters in this game is played by famous YouTube content creators who I'm a fan of personally, like, you know, Moist Critical, aka Charlie, and Jacksepticeye. And they don't feel like, even though they don't have a lot of voice acting experience, it never feels like they phoned in their performance at any point, or you could tell that, oh, you know what? It's clear that they just brought them along for the ride because it will be a nice little thing for the fans. And, you know, their performance wasn't really it, but, you know, I appreciate them being there. No, it wasn't anything like that. They genuinely did a pretty great job with the characters that they played. I was a big fan of Sonar in the game. One of the villains, who's played by Charlie, aka Moist Critical. Let's call him Critical for the video. In a way, he was basically just playing himself, which is what was great. The character in and of itself has a lot of characteristics similar to Charlie. You know, his deadpan commentary, you know, calm, cool, collected perspective and nature, except for when he's, you know, using his power, which is to turn into this enormous, insane, monstrous bat creature thing. And, you know, Jacksepticeye plays a tiny Irishman, which, you know, for obvious reasons is perfect. So yeah, I mentioned villains a couple of times and it sounded like I was confused as to whether to call them heroes or villains. That's the cool thing about Dispatch's story. You're basically playing a game where you are, again, a superhero dispatcher, Robert Robertson, played by Aaron Paul, who's dispatching a team of reformed villains who aren't really getting along together at the beginning. They're butting heads, they're being general a-holes. And naturally, over the course of the game, they start to become more heroic and they start to move past their inherent nature to do bad and to do evil deeds, obviously. That aspect of it isn't entirely new. This trope has been done before, but it's how we get there that's really fun and endearing. And the humor in this game, it is wonderful. The writing is great. It's right up my alley. It really reminded me of James Gunn's The Suicide Squad movie from 2021. That kind of humor is my jam, where you have a bunch of generally distasteful characters all taking jabs at one another and all being general pricks to one another. And you just love to see that dynamic and to see the characters evolve over time to come to respect one another and band together to do something for the greater good. It's awesome. And this game was basically nothing but that. Robert Robertson himself isn't a villain. He basically starts off as this Tony Stark-like character named Mecha Man, who commandeers this giant suit that's been passed down for generations in his family. And due to an altercation with his nemesis, Shroud, it's pretty funny that the villain's name is Shroud in this, played by the legendary Matthew Mercer, his suit gets destroyed. And he thinks that's it for him, but he gets this second shot at superhero work and helping people, saving people, via, of course, being a dispatcher, the titular dispatcher. So yeah, I thought the characters were wonderful. The concepts behind the powers, the supervillains, what they could do was really great. And I love this world that Ad Hoc have created overall, and it meshes together the gameplay and the narrative very, very nicely between the stuff that you get to do with the dispatch gameplay I was talking about earlier and the story stuff. So the way it'll generally go is you see a bunch of story stuff, you get to make your decisions with, you know, A, B, X, or Y on the controller, like old school Telltale games. You know, you basically influence Robert's responses throughout the game. And when he's at his desk, when he sits down at his desk to start doing the dispatching, that's when you start playing that segment. And then once that's over, you continue with the classic Telltale choose the dialogue options story aspect. Now, this game, it may not have Telltale's logo slapped on it, but it absolutely shares one-to-one all the DNA that the previous games had. When you say something really significant to characters, for example, the top left of your screen will show you the classic, you know, XYZ will remember that. So, you know, if you give this pep talk to your Z team, which is the name of the superhero or supervillain group that you're dispatching, at the top left, it'll say the Z team will remember that, and so on and so forth. All these trademark qualities that you remember from back in the day with Telltale are all here, and they're all done really well. The one thing this game doesn't have, which you might be wondering if you haven't played it yet, is there's no point and click aspect. That was a big trademark quality of these narrative-driven Telltale games back in the day, where between the story segments, the cutscenes, whatever you want to call them, you would roam around in these different environments, select things, pick up things, combine things. You know, there's this exploration aspect to the games. This game doesn't have any element of that whatsoever, but I personally feel like the dispatch gameplay itself more than makes up for it. It's really fun, and my favorite aspect personally of it was when you have the specific missions you have to send out the heroes for, it'll tell you what's going on, and it'll give you these keywords. So, for example, if there's a train that's going out of control and you have to stop it, there'll be different bullet points saying what you need to do specifically as a hero. So one will be like, stop the train as fast as possible, right? And they'll highlight certain words that will give you an indication of what stat you need to keep in mind when selecting your hero to go out for it. So say stop as quick as possible, right? So you look at quick and you go, okay, whichever hero I have that has the best agility, that's the man for the job. So you would select someone like, I don't know, say Sonar, who Charlie plays, to go out if you've given him a decent enough agility stat, and so on and so forth. And like I said earlier on in this review, the banter between these characters while you're talking to them as Robert and sending them out on these dispatches is wonderful. You know, the cutscenes themselves are great. The way the story unfolds is awesome, but it's the moment-to-moment gameplay conversations and small talk these characters make, insulting one another, poking jabs at one another, you know, all those little details that make this a really endearing, awesome experience with humor, once again, right up my alley. I loved the humor in this game. None of it was cringy. All of it felt appropriate and in line with the characters and the cast of the game and setup. I was having a great time. Now, what I will say is overall, the dispatch gameplay isn't, for me personally, but towards the end of it, it started to feel a little bit repetitive. But that's a me thing. I think a lot of people will really like this from start to finish. For me personally, I'm not huge on games where you have a certain amount of time to get something done. So obviously, you know, when you're looking at this map of the city and sending out your heroes to, you know, save the day, all the emergencies that you see as the dispatcher, they have a time limit. If you don't send a hero out to accomplish a mission fast enough, then you'll run out of time and you will have failed that specific operation. These kind of games stress me out personally. Like I said, it's got this overcooked energy, nowhere near as, you know, exhilarating or stressful as something like Overcooked. I mean, Overcooked is a game that's like, you know, you play that game if you want to destroy your relationship with your significant other in the best way possible, right? That is a stressful game. This game is in that vein, but nowhere near as crazy. But to me, all of them are pretty freaking hectic, and this game gets more and more hectic over the course of the experience, over the course of the 8 episodes. But that's fine. I mean, that's just difficulty ramping up, and I appreciated that. But for me personally, I struggle, dude. You know, for those of you who play the Telltale games, you'll know how at the end of the episodes, when the credits are rolling, and by the way, the credits are awesome. You know, the music that plays, all of that. It's done really well. It's like playing a TV show as always, like the Telltale games. When you see the credits, you also are presented with the stats, you know, what decisions you made compared to other players. So it'll be like, you know, you and 29% of other players decided to brawl and kick this other hero's ass, or develop a romantic relationship with this attractive superhero S. At the end of every episode, I shit you not, for me personally, this is how bad I was at the gameplay. I did better than 1% of players, according to the game. Maybe the stats are bugged, but if they aren't, I wouldn't be surprised. I'm bad at this stuff. I allegedly did better than 1% of other players at the dispatching gameplay, which is pretty freaking hilarious. And honestly, on that note, what I will say was my one little quip with this game was the fact that the dispatching itself, like what you failed and what you succeeded at, or overall, if you had more failures and successes at that specific day on the job, or vice versa, those didn't seem to have as big of an impact on the story itself. And I kind of wish they did a little bit more. There are certain things, don't get me wrong, that do get influenced by your dispatch gameplay itself, but not in the way that I was expecting. I ended up, without going into spoilers, on the final day, or rather episode 8, the finale of this game, I ended up totally botching the final dispatch mission when, the stakes were high. Things were going absolutely south for the city, and it was now or never to save the day. And if we didn't, that would pretty much be it, is what it felt like. I couldn't. I totally messed it up. And I somehow still ended up getting an ending for this game that seemed like all sunshine and rainbows, whereas I was convinced that I wouldn't get that and everything would be terrible. And I did some digging online after I finished the game, only to find it was very easy to get the ending that I did, or an ending very similar to it in the same vein, where everyone sort of lives happily ever after. There's only really one character whose fate is influenced negatively if you fail the final dispatch mission, and they aren't even that likable to begin with. And I walked away feeling like, okay, wait, that fate is a little bit deserved, to be honest. So that was really my only gripe with the game. But other than that, I thought this was a wonderful package. And I really hope that Ad Hoc considers doing a season 2, because I'm in love with these characters, their dynamics with one another, and the way their story evolved over the course of the 8 episodes. I finished all of them in one sitting, in one night. I waited for all of them to release because I like binging things. So that's essentially what we did here. And it's worth the price, absolutely. It's around $30, and I think that for that price, you get a solid amount of gameplay here with the dispatching stuff and a really nice story. And to top it off, of course, it's one of those games where they're branching paths. Depending on the actions you choose as Robert, you'll have different outcomes to different scenarios with different characters, and of course, the ending itself. I know I did say that I wish the dispatch gameplay influence the ending a little more, but that's not to say that the moment-to-moment decisions you make in the story and in the cutscenes don't do that. That's the meat and potatoes here. So yeah, initially I was compelled to this game by the voice cast. Freaking Jesse Pinkman and Moist Critical in the same game, right? How sick is that? But then I ended up staying for the genuinely great story. And I didn't touch that much on the animation, and I kind of want to. The animation is wonderful. This game looks like if every single episode of Invincible was given a really high budget the way the fans wanted it. Not to dig at Invincible, I love it. I'm a huge fan of it. I've read the compendiums, and I eagerly await season 4. I've been digging it. But not even I can deny that there are episodes where I just think to myself that, dang, you know what? I wish these animators were given more time by Amazon. I wish they were given a bigger budget to work with. There could be more here. It's already wonderful, but there's potential here that isn't being tapped into. But I can't complain too much. I'm just happy to say that this looks sublime. It's got this cartoonish look to it. And I drew a couple of comparisons while playing to Hi-Fi Rush, which I know it might sound like a weird comparison to a lot of you out there. But Hi-Fi Rush by Tango Gameworks, it came out 2 or 3 years ago, and it shadow dropped actually. It was a wonderful shadow drop. It was a really, really fun game with the same aesthetic, but obviously the gameplay is a totally different beast. I reviewed this game, by the way, on my channel if you want to check it out. It's a hack and slash game where everything moves to the rhythm of the music. So hyped, so amazing, so incredible. Obviously, tonally is very, very different too. But it does have, well, actually, in terms of the tone, the one thing it does share in common with Dispatch is the really upbeat, hyped up, feel-good energy. Dispatch definitely deals with some mature themes here and there. There are definitely some low moments for the characters and what have you. But overall, it really, when you go into an episode, you start off by feeling really ramped up, really hyped up, and the game instills you with a lot of feel-good, we're about to have a good time energy. And I love that vibe about it, and the aesthetic that goes with it, the animations, the colors, it all pops. But yeah, all this is to say, I'd probably give Dispatch a solid 9 out of 10. I really, really enjoyed it. And, I hope that Ad Hoc really considers doing a season 2, continuing this world that they've established, which is a really cool one. And there's so many more stories you could tell in it. And if not that, then I eagerly anticipate whatever it is that their next project is going to be. I remember back in the day when I finished the first 2 seasons of The Walking Dead, I then played The Wolf Among Us. And I remember thinking to myself, yeah, this is probably going to be kind of cool, but it's very different. It's not The Walking Dead. I don't know if the writing will be on point, but I ended up freaking adoring that game. And like I said, it's my favorite Telltale game. Actually, I don't know. Maybe The Walking Dead Season 1 is. It's tied between those two, right? Like I said, The Walking Dead isn't within my top 20 games of all time. And I'm pretty sure it even won Game of the Year back in 2012. Whatever, video game awards ceremony that was back then. Because this was pre-Game Awards by Jeff Keighley. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. My point is, I'm really excited to see whatever Ad Hoc creates next, be it in the same world as Dispatch or an entirely new one. And of course, for Wolf Among Us Season 2, which for those of you who don't know, that one is being worked on Telltale as they've been brought back from the dead, essentially. But it is also being co-developed, I believe. There's something like that going on by Ad Hoc. So they are contributing to the overall project. So I can't wait to see that, man. I can't wait to see what comes of it. We've been waiting a long time for it. I think the announcement for season 2 was like 3 or 4 years ago at this point. So let's make it happen finally, right? But hey, at the same time, take all the time you need. Anyways, guys, that's going to be it for me today. I highly recommend Dispatch if you love these narrative-heavy episodic games that it feels like it's been a long time since we've gotten. I want to say we're pretty much back now with Dispatch, right? This signals and this heralds a new beginning for episodic story-driven games, and I'm excited to be back and to see where all this goes. It really hits the nostalgia bone for me because I loved these games back in the day. Like I said, I used to love Telltale Games in the early to mid 2010s. Let's see what you do next, Ad Hoc. Best of luck to you. You guys cooked with Dispatch, and yeah, that's it for me today, guys. Keep on keeping on.